Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence with psychiatrist Bernard David Beitman, MD. Dr. Beitman is the founder of the Coincidence Project. The project encourages people like you to tell each other coincidence stories. To learn more about Dr. Beitman's work, put Connecting with Coincidence in your web browser. You'll find his book, his Psychology Today blog, and the interviews from this podcast. And now your host, Bernard Beitman, MD.
Hey there. Welcome to Coincidence. Connecting with a coincidence is what we do here. I am your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD. I've got a new book coming out in September called Meaningful Coincidences. Because meaningful coincidences illuminate the invisible currents that connect and unite us. Please subscribe and like us by clicking the buttons below, my finger down there somewhere. And please comment on this podcast. I've gotten some really good replies lately about fractals and stuff, and I like responding to them. So please let us know how you are affected by my conversation here with Les Velez. But first, some stories. The title of this group is called Evidence for Connections Between Minds. One of my psychotherapy patients was finally getting in touch with her anger. For most of her 40 years, anger often expressed itself as anxiety because being angry frightened her. She didn't know that. She's reading a book about assertiveness and had reached the anger section, now making her own anger more real to herself. As often happens in its life transition, and it was a big transition for her to start feeling anger, including at me, can you believe it? She was in a bathroom and someone's name came to her mind. And her husband in the other room exasperatedly screamed out this person's name. She was working on scheduling a class at school, and her administrator called and suggested a time that worked for her while she was trying to figure out what the best time might be. And then she was thinking about an old friend she had not had contact with in many years, who was doing something like what she was doing, it turned out, and that friend texted her. In another story, a psychotherapist discovers that he and his patient have the same dream the same night. The dream, each of them woke up dead. That phrase became the subtitle of the book that they worked on together. So what does this mean? There are many, many complicated explanations. The simplest one is that our minds are potentially connected with each other. That's it. That's it. How? We're looking at that, but I have some ideas, the psychosphere being one. The question becomes, what are the circumstances that increase the likelihood of two minds sharing the same thought around the same time? Well, we're going to get into intelligences beyond ourselves today with our guest, Les Velez. He is a graduate of the University of Vermont with a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, as well as a U.S. Army veteran and a former Vice President of Luscombe Engineering. Nice background. In 1991, Les joined MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and has held the following positions: field investigator, training coordinator for field investigators, the Assistant State Director in Northern California, Chairman of the Abduction Experiencer Research Committee. In case you haven't gotten the idea, we're talking about people who have contact with what we usually call UFO people, and team leader of the Abduction Response Team, and the Experiencer Resource Team, and presently holds the position of research consultant in the Experience Resource Team Experience Resource Team, which is how I got to him. In 1994, Velez co-founded the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. That's a wide-ranging set of experiences there, Les, but you're tuning in right now to non-human intelligence. So tell us a good story, Les.
Oh my goodness. Well, would you like a story about the one of the experiencers had? We can tell you that, or are you looking for a synchronicity story that I can tell you about?
Let's do that synchronicity story, but we're going to get into the experiencers, and we're going to define what non-human intelligence means to you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, this is interesting. This just recently happened. I happened to be looking through some articles that came my way via the mobile phone. So many things are available there, and it was about a clairvoyant by the name of Baba Yaga, who is a Bulgarian woman, and she's made many predictions, evidently, and a lot of them came true. Specifically, one of them was the 9/11 incident. She passed away in 1996. So anyway, later that morning, after reading that article, I got an email from Linda Moulton Howe, who is a researcher, has her own podcast on YouTube called Earth Files, and she asked me if a lot of the experiencers in our support group that Opus has have been talking about tragedies that may be coming our way. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, yes, there's been a number of people talking about that right now, whether it's earthquakes or tsunamis or, something even bigger. So then I told her about this prediction that this Bulgarian clairvoyant had talked about, and that which really was surprising to me, that in 2027, a asteroid would be guided here by aliens to hit the Earth. And well, that's quite dramatic information. So I wanted to let her know that I just saw this and sent her the information. And that same morning, a little bit later, she sent me an article from NASA that was done in a conference in Tokyo about a fact that in 2027 an asteroid would hit the Earth. But this was an exercise. This was written on every page, exercise only. Okay, and to me, that was quite significant. That through this process that morning, this all came about. And so as far as synchronicity is concerned, I thought that was quite dramatic. And the article had such detail in it. It was scary looking through it, the NASA article. And again, exercise only.
Yeah, that exercise only one is reminds me of a story that took place, in London, I think, where a group of anti-terrorist police were like practicing a drill that they anticipated might be something like what could happen. And as they were doing the drill, there was a terrorist attack happening at that moment in that place.
Well, I tell you, it is amazing how these things happen. And I've got one that goes back many, many years, which actually involves my wife. Before I even knew her. This was a junior year of high school. And there was a big dance that was going to be happening, sort of a debutante ball, if you will. And I got wind through the grapevine that some lady was going to some girl was going to ask me to this dance. And I didn't know the name at that point, just that this someone was going to ask me out. And so I happened to go to a varsity faculty football game. And I was in the stands and I was sitting below a couple of rather attractive women, girls. And next thing I know, I heard this one girl say, "Oh, I dropped my shoe." And so I I turned around and said, I'll help you. I'll go get your shoe." So I went under the stands and got the shoe and brought it up to her. And come to find out, this is the girl that was going to ask me out. And that blew my mind. It was just like unbelievable. How did that happen? I mean, I didn't know she was going to the game. She obviously didn't know I was going to the game. And then I sit 2 seats, a couple of rows down below her and hear her. And then I go get her shoe and find out that she's the one. And eventually we got married.
I was waiting for that punchline. You dragged that one out for me. Well,
Yep, almost 53 years later, we're still together.
And I've heard so many stories, something like that, Les, that after a while, a kind of plot of a three-dimensional thing develops in my mind of connections between people, kind of like the story I started off with, the story where the minds are like running around in this mental atmosphere I call the psychosphere. And they're not just in our minds, they're in this atmosphere, which I think is a palpable thing. I think it's part of this reality, but it's much more diffuse or like lightweight, but it's there, like light that you can't see or energy you can't see. So there you had an intention, kind of, she had an intention, and one shoe dropped, as the saying goes, and that was the sign. And how did you end up sitting next to her? I mean, I go to a conference, I want to see this guy. I sit down in an empty place. There's a seat, I sit next to, and it's the guy I'm looking for. I'd never seen him before. There's so many stories like this, and part of the purpose of the Coincidence Project is to tell each other these stories so somebody can say, like, "Hey, I've had that one happen to me." And then you begin to realize that if it happened to you, it's happening to other people too. You ain't that unique. You are experiencing the experiences of this planet, which we are increasingly needing to recognize as we are more connected than we realize.
Yeah, and that goes, same goes to people that are having experiences with, contact with non-human intelligences. I mean, these people think they're totally alone and they're the only ones that it's happening to, but the bottom line is it's happening to millions of people, millions.
Millions, eh?
Millions.
Millions. That's more than 10, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Millions of people. Now, being as I have inside of me a little character called Skeptic, how do you know there's been a million?
Well, back
Millions.
in 1992, the Roper organization released a survey that was initiated by Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and funded by Robert Bigelow. And the information that they gleaned from that survey was that there was perhaps 6 million people in the United States that were having experiences like that. And then you extrapolate today how much that phenomena has increased, because we've, my organization gets 2 to 3 emails a day, people looking for help with this phenomena. And there's other organizations out there that are doing similar things, maybe on a lower scale. But this is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just here in the United States, it's all over. So I feel very confident in saying that millions of people are having these types of experiences.
And first, let's start with what you mean by NHI, non-human intelligence. What is that? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I just got an email the other day from a person asking the same question, and it's sort of a catch-all type of a phraseology, because we believe that well, most of these experiences are dealing with quote unquote non-humans. Okay. However, in some of the cases, there are humans, especially military type people, that might be involved. Because the question of, are they extraterrestrial? Are they interdimensional? Are they time travelers, which could be us, or the military? And then you have the spirits, the poltergeist. These things are quite common when, as far as the paranormal is concerned. You have angels, demons, relatives that have passed on. It covers a very broad range of things. And so
Les, that is an amazing list you just went through. I mean, it's like you live it. I've heard it for the first time today, and there's going to be a few other people that will have heard it for the first time today too. So would you just do that list a little more slowly? Because
Sure.
it's a fascinating and varied group of people, a beautiful group of entities.
Absolutely. It even gets a little bit deeper as we go down the rabbit hole.
Well, I just got to say this: when Alice went down the rabbit hole, she had a pretty good time down there. It's not all bad. I mean, going down to this,
true.
it's
That is
scary.
true.
You find stuff down there.
Well, like I said earlier, that 70 to 80% of these people don't want the experience to stop. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, let's
so anyway, as far
yeah.
as we talk about, are they extraterrestrial in nature? That there's some, non-human, okay, intelligence that's visiting us. Then you have interdimensional type situations.
What is
where,
that? What are the dimensions you're talking about there?
Well, I mean, I guess there's various theories about how many dimensions are out there, in string theory. I don't know all the names off the top of my head, but there's like 3 types. One has 10, another one has 13, another one has 22 dimensions that are possible.
They're just stringing us out, Les.
Boom, I need a rim shot here. Yeah, and so that's something. The way that they're able to interact with the individual seems like it's interdimensional. Like they're there 1 second and gone the next, and they go around corners that there's no corner to go around, and they just dissolve. And then you have time travelers, which there's a case that happened in 1980 on a military base in the UK, where these military police, 2 military policemen were involved with the case, and one of them was abducted and came back and said that they were us 40,000 years in the future. And they've come back to gather some DNA because they screwed up somehow in the future and needed our DNA. So, I mean, are these things real?
Well, let's say they're reported, and that's what
Yeah.
we want to do here,
Right.
because in the mix of reports, there are whatever we mean by real, which is another problem, as well as stuff that isn't. I mean, that is made up. But imagination is funny. It makes rainy days sunny. There's a lot of ways imagination makes things real. So we're playing with that, but let's say they are real to the people who are experiencing them. And
Right.
here's some ideas about where they might come from. So the time traveler, interdimensional and time traveler are two categories.
Right. Besides extraterrestrial, which we've talked about. We've also got our military that perhaps most likely is involved.
The extraterrestrials we didn't really talk about. I mean, that means they come from a terrestrial that's not ours, extra somewhere, but
right.
they're living on a different planet. That's what you're telling us.
Right.
And I've got a friend who is a Pleiadian, and I've had the feeling, hasn't been around for a while, that that I am an intergalactic agent. I've had that feeling, and that
yes,
what I'm doing here is like trying to do something that you're going to tell us more about, but trying to help humanity stop destroying the earth that we live in and ourselves. That's go ahead.
That's absolutely, right on. I think that message that most of the experiencers come back with is exactly what you're doing, and that we need to be better, not only to the planet, but to one another.
Oh, that's where it starts. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's, you talk about a mission. All right. How it got started for me, when I was 11 years old, I saw an object that scared the hell out of me, and I ran into the house. And by the time I dragged my father out, it was gone. And I went to the library. Well, he said it was like just a beacon of light reflecting off a cloud, but I didn't believe that. And went to the library and started to read books about UFOs. And then life got in the way and kind of forgot about all that. And then this is the other, I think, synchronicity that happened to me when I moved out to California in 1985. I picked up the San Jose Mercury News, and Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist, was going to talk about UFOs and the government cover-up. And it was like somebody threw a switch, and I said, okay, I got to go see this guy. And he was going to talk at San Jose City College, and I expect to see a handful of people, and the auditorium was full. And he gave one of his inimitable, presentations. And on the way out in the foyer, there was a table that MUFON had, the Mutual UFO Network, organization that was started in 1969 by a couple of engineers, by the way. And so they have a journal, and I started to get the journal. And after a while, that wasn't enough. And then I decided that I would take their field investigator training and become a field investigator. And that's when things really started to come about, where most of the cases, without exception, were not only sightings, but also people having contact. And so these people would ask me, did I know of other people having these types of experiences? And I said, yes, I do. And I started to facilitate a support group with the help of a psychologist friend of mine in San Jose. And and here I am today, had started this Opus organization, Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, nonprofit, in 1994. And we've been helping people with an online confidential support group, and then also referrals to therapists, credentialed licensed therapists that are familiar with the topic, because that's something that is so needed. Unfortunately, a lot of therapists are just not aware of this kind of thing. And one of the things that we're doing right now is we're just completing the first phase of the Omega-4 project that I'm working with another psychologist, that we went out to therapists that are working with people that have had contact, and we came away with some interesting information in that regard. Is what are they utilizing, and how is it helping these people to get this information in their lives at a level where they can deal with it, and have a positive outcome.
Well, that's how I got to you, really,
Mhm.
through a therapist, psychologist you work with, who mentioned you. And I read some of the book Beyond UFOs, that big fat thing with a lot of stories in there,
Yeah. Mhm.
and talked to the guy who wrote it or put it together. What was his name?
Ray Hernandez.
Ray Hernandez. I interviewed him on the show too.
Mhm.
It was very interesting. So that's how I got to you. And then I became, I'm a therapist. I'm a psychiatrist. I do a lot of therapy still. And I became curious about just these experiences of these people that you've done. And to back it up, what you have done with your nonprofit in 1994 and support groups for people and make referrals to therapists who understand it, it's in a exact parallel of what I need to be able to be doing here. I don't even have a nonprofit yet. We're just trying to figure out how to get that going. This is new, but the pattern you're describing is just what we're doing, which includes some research abilities
Mhm.
to be able to put these stories together, find the patterns in them that make sense and that we can generalize from, and get the word out to people who think they're all by themselves in this, that there's something missing in their information, because there's a whole bunch of other people going through the same thing. So you can tell other people about it, so you feel that. But then, and this is where what you are telling me the people, the contactees tell you. Tell us what they tell you. Tell me what they tell you about what we should be doing here.
Well, I think, again, we've hit it a couple of times already. It is the fact that we need to be better stewards of the planet. I mean, that seems to be the number one thing that comes back time and time again. And then, of course, the being better to one another. All very positive type messages. Very few, come back with negative information whatsoever. Some of them have come back and said, "Well, we have a problem and it needs to be fixed." Well, that's negative, but also positive, because if we can fix the problem, a la polluting our water, our air, coming up with alternate forms of energy instead of utilizing fossil fuel, solar, all those types of things come up time and time again. And people ask me all the time, are they telling us the truth, or is this a lie, or are they good, are they bad? If you're in the camp of Bud Hopkins or David Jacobs, they're all bad. If you're in the camp of Greer, they're all positive. Well, I think we have good ones and we have bad ones, just like we have here on on our planet. We have good people, we have bad people. And I think even within the various races, because they talk about the grays, all right, which seem to be a real common denominator. Seems like all the other races, like mantids, praying mantis type, reptilian type creatures, all seem to utilize the grays. It's almost like they're almost like an iPhone, if you will. There's a shop out there in the universe where all these different races go to and pick up this this little gray guy to deal with abducting us and doing the experiments on the people, because we are violent people, basically. And I've had people talk about the fact that they've bit these grays, they've torn arms off. I mean, done all kinds of things, and I could see why. I think that most of them are afraid of us in a way, just because we are tend to be a very violent type of a race.
Yeah, the grays are. What did you laugh about there?
Well, it is just, it seems to me like all these other races are utilizing grays because they show up in almost every case, this gray being short, 3 to 4 feet tall. And then you have actually taller ones that seem to be in the background. And then the praying mantis type seem to be in control of the whole shooting match. And then of course there are Nordics that look like us, really quite attractive people. But they're identified as Nordics because of the way they look. But evidently they're not, earthlings, if you will.
What's a griffling?
I'm sorry?
What's a griffling?
No, earthling.
Earthlings.
Earthling.
They're not earthlings.
They're not earthlings.
They're not. We've mentioned the lizards, the praying mantises, and the Nordics, and there's others too. And they come from planets that we can see, our astronomers can see.
Well, that's a good question. There's been all kinds of conversation about the fact that they come from the Orion nebula. They come from the Zeta Reticuli. There's various, there's various areas that a lot of them seem to come from that people talk about. And
Palladians, they
and
got to be.
Dracos. Oh yeah, and the Palladians and Pleiades and Draco system. Yeah, and there's supposedly 76 different races that are, but most of them, I guess, are in the background, not really doing a whole lot. But the majority seem to be either the reptilian type, which evidently has a number of variations, the praying mantis type, and the grays, of course.
Well, the Greys are not the Greys are robots, pretty much. They're
biological, robotic in nature. Yes,
yeah,
they seem to be that way.
Yeah, and they're programmable by the various entities out there, and then there's a hierarchy of people behind and behind and behind.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that's a lot of interest in this planet from out there.
Well, yeah, in one respect, I guess it's a good thing, but in another respect, it could be a bad thing. They talk about the hybridization process. Matter of fact, I'm going to do an interview this afternoon with a woman that she feels that she has birthed like 12 different hybrid children. And
by hybrid, you mean probably combinations of lizards and human beings. Usually that's the one.
Exactly. And so there's a book by a woman called Rachel's Eyes. Helen Luttrell wrote this book with a therapist friend of mine. And she tells a story about her daughter going to school at Humboldt College up in Northern California with a hybrid, and who was basically brought special food by military type people. So there's, what's the purpose of the hybrid, hybridization process? Is this something that they need to do in order to propagate their race, or is this something that they're eventually going to take over the planet because they're perfecting? David Jacobs' latest book talks about hybrids. In other words, people that have been hybridized to the point where you can't tell if you're, the person next to you is a hybrid or not, because they look just like you and I.
And I'm going to guess the purpose of the hybridization, from my perspective, is to be able to replace humans who need to be replaced with people who are going to get along with each other better and be able to preserve the planet.
I like that. And I hope that's exactly what's going on. That would be wonderful in a way, because we could certainly use a number of people being replaced today. You know who they are.
And I don't know some of them either. I mean, they're in the newspapers, but
yeah,
there is, without question, forces that are not trying to help humanity. They are the forces of chaos. They like, in other words, the other way, that they're the forces of wanting to keep things the same. Which is often a white privilege version of that, but people don't like change. People don't like change. I like to ask my patients sometimes, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
I have no idea.
There are a few who say one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
That's very good.
Thank you. And that's what, thank you. That's what we've got on this planet. And I am developing ideas for a psychotherapy for the collective human organism, which would focus on almost the same thing as AA. My name is Adam, says the CHO, and I am addicted to materialism. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can't move change without an admission of the need for change. We got some free will here. So that's the psychotherapy I'm moving towards. So I wanted to ask you, as you were telling me earlier, when people come back and say we got to be nicer to each other and stop trashing the planet, do they come back with any methods of having that happen? Because that's what I'm trying to do.
Oh, well, that's a good question. And I don't have the answer to that. And that's something that, we're about to embark on the phase 2 of the omega-4 study, going out to the clients of these therapists. And we might add that to the survey question. Let me write that down.
Please do, because
yeah,
I need that information, and I don't think I'm the only one who can come up with how to do it. I have a lot of psychotherapy education. I've written a couple of books on psychotherapy and teach people and stuff, but I want to know how to go from it's not happening or it's too much trouble, or I don't want to think about it. I kind of know it's happening, but I don't want to think about it. I've got my children to take care of. So I have to keep making more children, because I have my children to take care of here, and I don't care about what happens to you. I just want to get the baby food and be able to create a warm environment. I have a lot of money. I want to be able to keep that money. It's mine. I earned it. No, you didn't. The social situation allowed you to do it, but no, you won't think of it that way. There's a lot of ways in which people are saying, I don't want to change. And the biggest one is make America great again, which is to say, make it the way it used to be, or keep it the same, pretty much is what we got. So there is in human psychology a kinetic inertia of wanting to keep going in the same direction.
Yeah, and there's a conscious dissonance that really goes on here. That people get up in the morning, have breakfast, go to work, come home in the evening, have dinner, watch a little TV, go to bed. Next day they do the same thing over and over and over again, and it's like it's something that's maybe comforting to them, and they don't want anything to, as you say, change. But the bottom line is things need to change in order to have a more positive outcome on the other end. I think that understanding what these experiencers what have they done since they got that message, are they recycling more now? Are they, did they buy an electric vehicle instead of a gas guzzler? There's all kinds of things that certainly can be done. And I even struggle with that at sometimes because I've heard this message over and over again. I'm trying to have the least carbon footprint as possible, so.
I
don't have an electric car, not yet.
I do know. I have a hybrid, and to get the electricity, you got to get it from someplace. So they're going to, so it's still not exactly a best solution, but it's somewhat better than using entire fossil fuels. But the question, Les, and for our audience listening to us, the question is, there are hundreds of things to do, like cleaning the plastic out of the ocean. No, we got to stop using plastic.
Yeah.
That's a major change. Companies are going to have to do major retooling, which is expensive. There are all kinds of the cows we can't be eating. We can make the list. You started doing it, but there's hundreds of things to do. And it can't be done just by Les or Bernie doing it at home or trying to do it at home. It has to be done as a collective action. We have to do it in some kind of unified way. So what I am asking these non-human intelligences to help me, to help us, maybe through you, is how do we get from all these different people out here saying, I don't want to change in various ways, to be able to find what I think is your particular place as a cell in the human organism. Your particular place in the human organism could be fingers. And for some of us, it's going to be in the mind of the human organism. It's going to be in where I call the self-observer of the collective human organism, that observes the mind of this collective human organism and observes what's going on in the body of the organism, and watches its interaction with the planet, and then begins to coherently, cohesively set about using its various capacities, because these cells of which we're a part are not stuck together only. It's that difficult sense of being part of the human organism and being separate from it. And people have trouble with doing separate and together.
Duality.
Duality is continuum, and we have a duality. I want to be able to say you're not wrong, but we also have a continuum. We also have a merging, and to be able to know both. The best way some people get it is through love, certain kinds of love, where you merge with the other, but you need to be able to separate from that other person as well. So love is a big answer in all this. There are a lot of people say this. I'm sure your people come back and say, hey, baby, love is the answer here somewhere. You get that one. But what is love? I mean, how do we organize and direct ourselves with the energy of love, which there's so much of, but we ride on anger, which is so more easily gotten to. I'm giving this long talk. It's kind of the first time I've said it kind of as clearly as this, but especially to you, Les, because you have contact with observers that I can't get to. These guys are observing lizards, and they're looking at us. And I want to see if maybe somehow through your contactees, they can tell us how to organize this collective human organism and start doing a coherent approach, not just one person at a time, everybody at a time, and one person at a time.
Yeah, and I think they're in the process of doing just that, based on the fact that there's so many people that are having these experiences. Is that on an, so certainly on an individual basis, they're being contacted, they're being told these positive things, and like I said, 70 to 80% don't want them to stop. The rest of them, have had maybe negative experiences, and so that's not a good thing. But yeah, as far as a collective, and I think we are going to reach critical mass with this once enough of the world population has had this experience. One day we're going to wake up and say, oh yeah, of course, this is the way we have to do this. There's no question about it. We've known this all along. And so I think that that process is happening, but it's at a pace that perhaps maybe too slow, or not fast enough. I don't know, but as I said,
I'm going to
Yep.
say, it's lacking in a vision that's necessary.
Mhm.
That if everybody, or when everybody's coming together, and there is a coming together with the non-human intelligence reports you're giving me, which are incredibly important to know about, and the synchronicities which are increasing, there is a coherence building, but we need a vision of how that coherence is to cohere.
Mhm.
Not
Mhm.
just, I want to do something, but
Yeah, I think that this Israeli retired general that wrote a book recently, Haim Eshed is his name, and he talks about the fact that we are in contact with the civilization, and that this civilization does not want to come out at the present time because they feel that we are not ready. They also talk about the fact that there's bases on the moon and on Mars, and we know all about it. And this general is highly regarded, involved with their space program. So, that kind of revelation, I mean, if the aliens decide, whoever they are, to come out and you know, land on the White House lawn, if you will, like the day the Earth stood still, that'll focus people. I think that will absolutely focus people, and I'm pretty sure that 70% of the population will be able to handle it, but the other 30% could have a rough time with that revelation.
yeah, there's gonna be people having trouble with that.
Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear about the bases on the moon.
Mhm.
There's old civilizations under Antarctica have been a standing theme in some of these discussions. So there is so much activity around these human being things on this little planet out in the middle of nowhere. Apparently, we're kind of a way station, and it's almost as if the universe, at least as they know it, needs to have a stable Earth with good consciousness on it in order for the whole thing to keep working. That's the only thing I can think of.
Mm. Yeah, there's so many questions and so few answers in this
Well,
regard.
I'm really we there's a lot going on out there. I mean, you've made that clear. We don't know a lot about it, but you're learning. Your people are reporting. But what we need to do is cohere,
Mhm.
and that it takes leadership, and it takes people believing in the leadership. This collective human organism will not be composed of every human being. There will be people who won't want to, can't come in with it. And it may be that some of the hybrids you're talking about can lead the way towards making this organism, which is just literally with its big feet trashing Mother Earth, just clomping on forests
Mhm.
and lakes and all kinds of places, metaphorically, but really smashing a lot of wildlife and other people. And as
Yeah.
the collective human organism is destroying this planet. So the vision I have is of something that looks like a human being, shaped like it, but is
Hmm.
made up of individual cells of
Mhm.
other people who can separate
Right.
out and do their own thing too. So that's the question I'm asking you to keep in mind, is that
Mhm.
what is that as a vision for humanity? Because you are in touch with people who are in touch with more intelligence than we've got down here.
Yeah, and I talk about that a little bit in the book that I just recently wrote, The Unknown Other. and the existential proposition of alien contact.
Uh-huh.
And you know, certainly I go over the psychological and physical ramifications of contact, the various types of characteristics that occur to people, whether it's implants or marks on the body, and things of that nature. I go back into prehistory, talk about the Paleolithic era where there's cave drawings of spaceships and all this kind of thing. I mean, this is something that's been going on for eons, probably since, of course, there's theories about the fact that they have manipulated us, eons ago to cause us to be what we are today. And people like Gary Nolan and Kit Green have, worked with abductees as well, and finding that there's differences in their brain structure in the caudate putamen area, where there's more connections with these people that are telepathic or psychic, and they seem to have a lot more connections in that area than the control group that they looked at. I mean, there's so much to this, but your focus, I think, is very positive. Something that we will have to do, or we will not survive. I mean, it's that bad. I mean, because the way we're going right now, the way we're polluting, we're not going to have clean water to drink and no air to breathe, and all it's going to eventually be nothing but carbon dioxide, which I don't think we're going to do very well on.
You got it. You got it. It to me, it's like a heroin addict stealing from his family. It's an addiction.
Yeah.
And it's an addiction, and we have to look at it as an addiction. And all the stories you're telling me are wonderful to hear, and I appreciate getting this wonderfully broad vision you have. That's somehow you've gotten used to hanging around in your mind, which is a lot to hold on to, but you've got other people to connect you with, and so that's I deeply appreciate being able to talk with you, because you are a grounded guy. You were in the military and an engineer. You know that there are things you can bump your head against and it hurts. That that, but you also know there's something else going on out there. So I'm giving you almost a plea to help me help the planet.
Sure.
Collect.
Whatever I can do to help you. I absolutely.
Well, you have the basics. You're kind of a research arm to me of like being able to contact non-human intelligences through your people that you interview or hear about, or in groups. It's not enough to say we got to change the planet and be nicer to each other. We have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
How to do that. How to learn to love and be loved in return. Both of those are hard for people. Some people learn to love and then feel the love back from somebody. These are
for me, one of the most gratifying things is to have these people in the support group tell me, on a personal basis, how much they appreciate what I've done to help them, by either making referrals or having that support group where they can talk to one another 24/7. And I have people there's over 300 people in the group right at the moment, and they're from all over the world. We have South America, Australia, Europe, all over Europe, Africa, and nobody from China yet. But I think that's because we haven't cracked their wall over there for whatever reason. But evidently, the largest UFO group in the world isn't based in China. So that's very interesting. But yeah, it's been gratifying for me. And there are times when I've said, okay, that's enough. I've had it. And then I'll get a phone call or I'll get an email, and then I'm pulled back in. So I think that's my mission. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing by helping people. And now the next thing, and the next logical thing, and now what do you do with that information? And how do you propagate that in a way that's meaningful?
When you say that information, what information are you talking about?
Well, I mean, the information that we need to be better to one
Oh,
another, the planet and
oh.
things of that nature. Yeah.
So I've just appeal almost to your engineering background to develop algorithms, interpersonal algorithms, because it has to be done with people. Technology really helps.
Mhm.
The metaverse can help in some ways. And I know people who are trying to get a peaceful metaverse thing going where the
Mhm,
people
mhm.
can interact well, but it's not enough to be, oh, I am touched by whatever experience, God
Right.
or an
Yeah.
NHI, and I'm the special thing, and I've got friends that are like me. That's not enough anymore.
Right.
It's not enough to be so special. We're all special, and we're all very similar to each other. And being able to keep that in mind. But I am, without trying to say it in any other way, I am looking to you as a source of information about how to organize the collective human organism, to admit the problem and to start doing the many different things we need to do in a coherent way. That's my plea to you.
Okay. Well, I will certainly think about it.
Thank you.
That's something that I will ask the group too, what they've done to make change, and then ideas as far as how can we multiply the effect. So
Well, I'd like to send you a section from the chapter of my new book on the collective human organism.
okay,
So
yeah, please.
it's a visual thing
Mhm.
that I'm developing, and this might give you a clearer idea of what I have in mind, and that might be a way for you to talk with your.
Yeah.
But I want them to be asking their next NHI experience this
Mhm.
question too. That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah. No, that's that's a great question. Absolutely. I will. I've written it down. I will be asking that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're quite
It's
welcome.
it's a it's a it's a pleasure to be able to talk with you in many ways, Les. You're fun to talk with, but this is like I'm like this. At least you understand what I'm talking about. It's better than anybody else so far. I mean,
Oh,
that's other people kind of get it, but you're in a place where you're looking at this little blue marble through the minds of NHIs that are being reported to you. So I've talked about what I had to ask you. I didn't realize I had to ask you this, but tell us what you want to tell us about what you know and what you feel and what you want and what you're doing.
oh, okay. Well, I think, the organization that I co-founded in 1994 with a doctor friend of mine, um, I think we're providing a service, a benefit to people that are having experiences. And obviously we'd like to continue that effort and by getting the word out in more places, like your show here. I think it's important that most of these people don't know where to turn when they have an experience. They a lot of times they can't talk to family members. They can't talk to their clergy. And a lot of them think that they are going crazy, and they go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then they find out that, well, they're not crazy.
This is
So then
exact parallel to what happens with synchronicity. Exact parallel. But what happens with your people is weirder usually. So tell us some weird NHI stories where people come back and tell you stuff that's hard to believe.
Well, there was a couple that was picnicking at a state park north of Santa Cruz, California, and they were coming out of the park at dusk. And this is a park that's rather has a real slope to it, and so they were in the upper part of the park, and they were coming down towards the ocean, and they noticed this light over the ocean, and it got bigger and bigger, and it was finally over their head, and it was a triangular craft, and this craft was not making any sound, and it kind of went into a canyon behind them and sat there. And they noticed this other light over the ocean, and this thing turned out to be another triangular craft. And the first one, when they observed it, they felt they were looking at it, and the second one, they felt it was looking at them, and so they became frightened. And well, this happened 5 more times, and these craft were about the size of a small Learjet. Okay, and they sat in this canyon for a while, and then all of a sudden, it's like they blinked out. They just disappeared. And at that point, they felt like they were like automatons, and they felt that they were drifting down out of the park. And this park, and I've been there. I actually investigated this area with them. Is even during the day, it's very dark because of the foliage and the vegetation, and it's rocky in some places. In this particular path that they were on, even during the day, you'd have a hard time getting down out of there. But they seem to just all of a sudden float down through there, and that's the last thing they remember until 3 hours later. They're at this restaurant north of the park, which was only like 10 minutes away, but they lost 3 hours of time. They had no idea what happened in that interim period. And so they eventually came to one of the support group meetings with some pictures, and they had developed a rash after this incident. And of course, the park has poison oak, poison ivy, things of that nature. But they had gone to a doctor, and the doctor said, no, that wasn't it. And they went to another doctor, said, well, maybe something internal, an allergy of some sort. But he couldn't, could not say what it was. Well, they brought the picture to the group, and they showed it around, and almost without exception, each of the people in the group said that they had a similar rash at one time. And one of the people in the group said, well, I'm pretty sure I know what that's from. And we said, what do you know? And she said that, well, it's a reaction to the fluid that they dip you in to sanitize you when they bring you on board the craft. So there you have it.
Well, tell some people do remember being aboard the craft. Tell us some of those stories.
Well, the people that are, they talk about, again, this is very common, where they're brought on board the craft. They're laid on a table, feels like metal, but then it's kind of combination of metal and softness in some way. All the areas are rounded. There's a bright light. There's usually small grays around them. Then there might be a tall gray as well. And then a lot of times there's a praying mantis type that seems to be in charge of the whole thing. And then oftentimes there may be military people in the background, or Nordics that are observing the whole process. So, and then sometimes people talk about the fact that it's a very congenial, very nice situation where they get to fly the craft. And they're taken to the moon, on the backside of the moon, and they see these large facilities down there on the backside. One of the people that one of our advisory board members, Terry Lovelace, talks about the fact that when he was in the service with a buddy of his, they were camping, and this huge triangular craft, multi-story craft, basically came down, abducted them, and he remembers sitting there, like feeling like a robot with all his clothes in his hand. He was naked, and then he saw all these other people in the craft, and they were, basically in a similar situation. So there was multiple people. His buddy that was with him had a terrible time dealing with it, and eventually became an alcoholic and died from the experience, where Terry, thank goodness, was able to deal with it, and eventually had therapy, and was able to realize the things that occurred to him during these experiences. But I mean, the stories, there's always twists and turns. I mean, there's a case I was involved with where a young boy was taken through a window, and his blanket got caught in the window, and the authorities came and removed the window for evidence. Because you hear about this all the time, where people are taken through walls, their atoms are disassembled. There's one case, one of the cases, and I have, matter of fact, 25 different stories from people in our support group that are in the book, The Unknown Other. And one of the stories by Adam is fascinating, because they not only talk about disassembling his atoms and reassembling them like a transporter on Star Trek, but also reincarnation. That reincarnation is very real. And that reminds me of another story. I was sitting there at one of the support group meetings in San Jose, and a person says to me, "I've seen you before." I said, "Oh, really? Where? At the UFO conference, grocery store?" And he said, "No, I saw you on board a craft." I said, "Really? Oh, that's interesting." And I kind of blew it off. And it was probably a year and a half, 2 years later, that another person said, "I've seen you before." And I said the same thing. I said, "Where? UFO conference, grocery store, gas station?" No. You were sitting on this bench naked on board the craft, and you were freaking out. And they told me to go over to you to calm you down. And I said, "Really?" And so that's when I decided to go get regressed. And I had 3 different people regress me. I found nothing to that effect. However, I had multiple past lives. And subsequently, I talked to someone more recently, and they posited the fact that perhaps you were abducted in a previous lifetime. And so that might be something that you might want again, go get regressed and go to that lifetime and see if maybe you were taken. So it gets so complicated.
Those are the stories to hear for our audience, as well as for me, from you, who for all evidence is a reliable reporter, unless you're just a made up gray who's learned how to behave, which doesn't look like it's the case. What makes these experiences so positive that 80% want to go back to have them again?
Well, what happens is usually the very first stage is frightening. It's stressful. However, based on the actual events of the contact, these people come to a point where, based on, again, the interaction with whoever they're interacting with, is more benevolent than malevolent. And they come to accept the situation. And then it's almost like the Stockholm syndrome takes over near the end of their experiences, where it stops. And then they start to wonder, well, why? Because we've been having nice conversations, and, you haven't done anything weird to me. So, why are you stopped? And, there's questions, of course, why people always ask that, why me? Why is this happening to me? And we don't have any definitive answers on that. However, it seems to follow generations of people, where a person might not know that their parents or their grandparents have had similar situations going on, and they're following generations because of whatever they did to manipulate their DNA way back when, or they seem to follow indigenous peoples. They also follow military type people. And so is this a process, eventually of uh, getting these people indoctrinated in a way that is more positive, and, that collective thing that we all need to strive for and make happen?
Ray Hernandez believes these crafts are not real,
Mm.
in the physical sense, that
Mhm.
they're electromagnetic illusions or something, but they're not.
Mhm.
They're parapsychological creations. Kind of best way I can say it. Well, how do you respond to
Yep.
that?
Well, I think probably some of them are. I think it's a multifaceted type of a situation, because you do have burn marks that these things create on the ground, imprints where the impressions have been measured, that these craft had high tonnage in order to make those impressions in the ground. And you have the statements from military people that have been up close and personal with these things and touched them. Actually, the Rendlesham Forest case is a perfect example of that. So I think it's more than that. But Ray's perspective, I think, is that it's more of an angelic type of a situation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and we're going to have to stop in a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned angels, because we are talking about a multiplicity of non-human intelligences. I
Mhm.
think of my dog had a non-human intelligence too. So I get mixed up with that phrase, because
Uh-huh.
I know trees that seem to have non-human intelligence as well. So it really means to not from this planet, walking around or in the ground kind of people, is what you mean by NHIs. I want to be clear about that just for me.
Yeah, I think that's a term that needs to be redefined, perhaps. I've now 2 days in a row now, I've had people tell me, what do you mean by that? Because are you not talking about spirits anymore, or the past loved ones coming back, and, poltergeist activity? And I said, yes, actually, we're talking about all of that. But yeah, it's a good point.
And those are humans, because yeah, I do think because the word non and
Yeah,
negative makes it negative too.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, and it elevates the human somehow
Mhm,
as the
mhm.
center, even though
Yeah,
it's indirect, and we don't want that, because
yeah,
that's not true. There's a
right.
lot of other stuff. So
I,
yeah,
gu- I guess what it is that it seems to be a common term that's been utilized recently to talk about the phenomena, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be restated in a more meaningful way. That's
if we
like some people talk about paranormal. What the hell does that mean?
and that's a broad thing, paranormal. But in order for the general public to accept what we're talking about, it would help to have it a different term. from non-human. It's
Mhm.
like, and they're very human in a way. I mean, caring and loving, some of them are.
Mhm.
So what's human anyway? So it's like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
becomes. So anyway, you got the
Well,
idea.
Bernie, I want you to think about what we could use in the future.
All right. So
Yeah,
we
really.
got some jobs for each of us.
Yeah.
I'll see what I come up with,
All
and
right.
and part of that, as we get to the end of our conversation here, is the other ones besides like lizards and praying mantises and
Mm.
some kind of military form and several others you mentioned that could be from other planets or from as a time travelers. There's like more up close and personal in what I would call our psychosphere. They're around us.
Mhm.
From and you've named some of them, but please go through it a little more slowly. Poltergeists and loved
Yeah.
ones and others. So what's the ones that are a little closer to us?
Well, again, we talked about extraterrestrials, interdimensionals,
Yeah.
time travelers, military, Nordics, all those. Um, and then you have orbs. The
Oh
first
yeah.
thing that people talk about are the grays. That's number one. Number two are orbs. And then, which are these balls of energy. And I was in Sedona, and I met with Tom Dongo, who's kind of the celebrity there and about the paranormal in Sedona. And he said, you got to talk to this lady. She takes pictures of these orbs, and she knows when they're going to appear and starts to take pictures with her camera. And so I did meet with her, and it was an evening. We're sitting on the back porch overlooking this canyon in Sedona, and she says, "Okay, they're here. I'm going to start taking pictures." So she braced herself against the corner of the house and started to take pictures. And one of the orbs, which I couldn't see because it was over my head, was a red orb with like a little yellow bump on it. And as she was clicking away on the camera, this little object turned. And so the yellow cap moved. And so it was obviously there. It was not an aberration in the camera because it actually moved. And she had other pictures that she had taken and blown up. And you could see, literally, you could see the typical gray alien head looking out of the orb. One was close to the front of the orb, so his head was bigger. And then you could see in the background other aliens looking different directions, like this portal opened up. And so that's what they're kind of thinking, that these orbs are actually some kind of a portal that's floating around. All kinds of talk about that these things can be harmful. There's a recent book out called Skinwalker at the Pentagon um, that talks about people having health issues after this orb would enter their body. And then Kathleen Martin wrote a book called Extraterrestrial Contact, and talks about people that have had positive experiences where a man had cancer. This orb went into his body, and shortly thereafter he had no cancer anymore. It was just gone. Um, uh,
So that's the
we haven't
orb.
even we haven't even talked about healing and that whole thing, but
Well,
that's the whole.
well, Ray's dog got healed, and that
Yeah.
by going away. So you just did talk about healing, and I think we can leave that, but for now. But it happens.
And
The idea of an orb
uh-huh.
as a portal is new to me. So
Mhm.
what are the and what are some of the other entities like the past life people, like deceased loved ones and stuff?
Yeah, well, they talk about that the spirit world, poltergeist was the third thing, or actually the fourth thing, because interdimensionals came after the orbs, and then poltergeist activity, ghosts. And then you have people in the group, the support group, that talk about demons, where, and they've also talked about spirits, that this young man was in a house that who hung himself, and he stayed in the house, and he kept coming back and forth, and finally they were able to send him on his way. But then there was a demon in that mix as well, and a woman came in to try to excise this demon, and found out that there was a ley line going through the house, and that this entity was coming up out of there, and this entity proceeded to scratch this woman, on her back and various other places, and they eventually were never able to excise this, get rid of it, and eventually sold the house, and then the house sold again and again and again, and
I had a
what is
patient.
that?
I had a patient who had a demon inside of him,
Mhm.
who
Yeah,
kept, and he went to John of God and couldn't get him out.
mhm.
He didn't know what to do about it, and ended up killing himself.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are times when they don't get the proper kind of help, or they can't find the help, and that does occur, and it's sad. We've been very lucky so far that people have talked about committing suicide, have gotten the help that they needed, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of that in other places in the world. We had a person in Turkey contact us that was feeling suicidal, and I said, well, I didn't know they were in Turkey at the time of the email, and so I recommended that they contact the suicide hotline, our national number, and then she wrote back and said, but I'm in Turkey. But luckily, the group got her by that. And I tell you, it's been such
What was driving her to want to commit suicide?
the fact that this thing was going on with her. She was one of the ones that was not having a very positive experience.
So there was a demon going on with her?
No, it wasn't a demon. This was extraterrestrial in nature, or
Yeah.
yeah,
She was going.
yeah.
She was extraterrestrial, and she was
Yeah.
going to the craft, and it wasn't as much fun.
Right.
So they kept bringing her back, but she wasn't party time for her.
Exactly.
So how'd the group get her out of that one?
Well, I think they told her that to be to stop it, okay, in order to be very positive. And what I found too is the fact that when people, there's a curiosity that exists in people trying to understand what's going on, and so they're conflicted, and they want it to stop, but they also want to find out more about it. So you have to be very positive minded about it and say, I don't want this to happen. I want you out of here. I don't want you in my life. You have to get angry. You have to be really, really positive. And then there's a woman by the name of Ann Druffel that wrote a book called How to Defend Yourself Against Alien Contact. And she puts in her book 9 different ways that people that have written to her have stopped the experiences. And one of them is to evoke the name of Jesus Christ, and you can go the religious route. And then other people talk about this anger, which I've seen more and more times seem to work pretty well, where they just say, just get the hell out of here and don't bother me anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that to you, Ray. I mean, that's the last. I'm going to say that to you, Les.
Get the hell out of here.
Get the hell out of here. That's a nice way to get. Well, not so. It's a segue.
Yeah.
Before we get out of it, Les, tell just so our audience get to know you a little better. Some more personal things about you that you might like to be able to have people know about Les Velez.
Well, yeah, okay, absolutely. Well, I think the thing that I want people to understand is that the organization that I co-founded, OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, it can be found at opusnetwork.org. which is all over the place right behind me here. You can see the logo in the web address. But yeah, I've played soccer in college and was in the military. I was part of Luscombe Engineering, as you mentioned earlier, which is actually a manufacturer's rep organization. We were involved with power supplies and LCD displays, selling to people like Apple and Cisco and companies like that. So we were a professional sales organization. And but we got into the engineering side of it by recommending various products to these other engineers. We always work basically with engineers. And then we would interface with the purchasing end of it as well. Yeah, I have a couple of daughters. One lives in Seattle, one lives near me here in Texas, and got 6 grandchildren, and you know, we're doing that thing. Been married for almost 53 years now, and married to that wonderful woman that decided to drop her shoe.
And so the shoe dropped, and your life.
Yeah,
was
I was so easy. I was so easy.
And it's wonderful when it's so easy. Wonderful when it's so easy. So thank you very much, Les, for talking with me. It's been really an important discussion from my perspective, to see the parallels and the potential for having similar visions about what we need to do here on this planet.
Absolutely. I really appreciate being with you today and opening up another possibility as far as what we can do to help one another, but also the planet.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for being there. So thank you for being on the show, and thanks for meeting with me.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.